All right, what's up, world? It's your boy Farmer Fredo, just checking in. Today I'm at the Flint RiverQuarium in Albany, Georgia. It's one of our community garden spaces that we have throughout the city. Um, as we talk about with Flint River Fresh, we're about increasing access to fresh food, and so what we do is we have community partners that allow for us to do community gardens, but also to create spaces where we can teach people how to grow food for themselves. So today, what I'm going to give you is basically what I call food gardening 101, or as I like to say, grow your own groceries. So I'm going to give you a couple different pointers that would help you with developing a garden in your backyard, your community center, your faith base, or if you want to, just an empty lot in your neighborhood. So first thing, before you plant anything, number one, you have to know about sunlight. So when you're looking at your garden space, what you want to do, where you want to grow, you want to make sure you have a spot that has at least 5 hours of direct sunlight. Now, if it has 4, you might be able to do some produce, but it might be very limited to what you can do for the summertime, right? So you want to have 5 hours of direct sunlight. Now, you might be looking at this and saying, Fredo, how do I know if I got 5 hours of direct sunlight? Well, there's a couple things you could do. Number one, you could just take a Saturday where you're just lounging at home, chilling at the crib. Every 2 or 3 hours, look out your back door and see how much light that you see happening over a 5 or 6 hour period. You could do it that way. Or there's a lot of apps that you can like download to your phone that tracks the trajectory of the sunlight for your area. So my recommendation, being the lazy farmer that I am, is taking a Saturday while you're watching Netflix or Hulu during the advertising breaks. Just look outside real quick to see how much sunlight you're receiving. So that's number one, sunlight. Number two, the location of your garden. Location is everything. You want to make sure that you put it in a place or an area that you're going to see constantly. Because you heard the saying, out of sight, out of mind. If you put your garden at the very back of your property, even though you're thinking you're going to go check it day in and day out, as a farmer myself, I'm here to tell you, when it's 90 degrees outside, even though it might be just a 50-foot walk or a 100-foot walk or a quarter-acre walk, man, it's just too hot for all of that. So you want to make your garden be in a place that's close to you where you can look at it and see in it. And what that helps you do is that helps you take ownership of the property, but then also allows for you to see the transition that your garden is going through. So you want to make it in close proximity for to look at it, but then also for when it's time to water. You know, I mean, we've all seen the pictures of the old farmers with like the water wells, and they have like the two cast iron buckets on the side. They're walking back and forth, tugging, 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 tugging. No, we don't want those anymore. We have water hoses now that go 100 feet, so we can connect them to the faucet, but you want to make sure that it's in close proximity to like your water source. So number one, sunlight, location. Number two, the location of your garden is important. And the third thing is really what we're going to focus in today is about how to plant, what to plant, when to plant, and just some techniques that we utilize like for our garden spaces, all right? So number one, first thing that we decide is the season that we're in. So right now we're in Southwest Georgia. We really have what I call 3 sort of growing seasons. So we have spring and fall, they mirror each other. Summer, which is its own like separate entity, and then the winter. So right now we're in what I call the spring mode. So what we're looking at planting would be your beans, your cucumbers, your squashes, your watermelons, your zucchini, and you also just want to plant like some flowers, mixing those in with some herbs. So before you do that, you have to decide the season that you're in, whether it's spring, summer, winter, or fall, and then from there, it'll help you determine what you're going to put into your raised boxes. So I said raised boxes. So a lot of people, there's a couple different techniques that can be utilized for like growing food. So you have your typical in-ground planting where people are just like have a tiller or a tractor that going by, just tearing the field, turning it up. That could be recommended if you have like that sort of like access to be able to do that sort of thing. Then you have some people that use a technique that's called lasagna gardening. And that's basically where they lay down layers of organic matter, whether it's cardboard, newspapers, composting, and just let it sit in the area for about 3 or 4 months. But I'm more about let's teaching people how to grow food right now at this moment. So I do what you see behind me is called raised bed container gardening. And so the basic premise of this is that with the raised bed, it elevates the soil off of the ground. It creates enough spacing for the plants to grow. It's in a contained environment, so you can actually help with the aesthetics, the layout of your backyard. And then it also makes it just easier for you to plant and to keep a weed-free environment. So when we do our raised boxes, as you see behind me, we like to use 2x8 if we're just doing them one layer, or 2x10 wood if we're doing them two layers. 2x8 for two layers, 2x10 for one layer. And so what I have behind me, I use 2x8 wood to make a double layer, which gives me 16 inches of spacing, right? And I use yellow pine. I don't prefer to use like pressure treated wood. I mean, I have used it in the past, but I try to use something that most people can find in their big box store or their local feed and seed hardware store that makes it more accessible. And then with the boxes, as you see right here, our basic standard size for our boxes, we tend to make them 4 feet wide. And the reason why we do it 4 feet wide, it allows for us to be able to work both sides of the bed. So with it being 4 feet wide, I can be on one side of the bed, reach into the center to reach a plant. And it also allows me to be on the opposite side to reach in and reach a plant. So 4 feet wide works very well for adults. So if you have children, you could do something like what you see behind me, which are like 2 feet wide or 3 feet wide, that it still allows for them to work within the space. So once we have an idea, and then the length, it doesn't matter. You can make this 4 feet by 4, 4 feet by 8 feet long, 4 feet by 20 feet long, 4 feet by 50 feet long. That part, it doesn't matter. It's all about the width, so it allows for you to be able to go in and out the bed, to keep it weed free, to help with planting, and also just to make it a tad bit easier. And so once we get to the point, we got our boxes constructed, the other reason why I like the raised beds in particular is because we can create our own soil mixture. Because see, we're here in Southwest Georgia, in the city of Albany. Most of our areas filled with like red clay, which is like hard, it's like growing in bricks, right? And so what we do is that we emphasize you make your own soil mixture or doing like compost. And so what I have is like, I call it a magic recipe. So this is what I would say you could do at home and just pay attention to the ratios that I would use. But these are things, again, that you can purchase at your local big box store, feed and seed store, your local nursery, just to help you get started with starting like your own raised garden box. So number one, you want to have like a base like potting mix. Your potting mix has like a mixture of peat moss. It might have some cocoa coir in it, but that's really in place to help with water retention. Because whatever you plant, you want the water to stay close to the roots of the plant, but also that if it does get too filled with water, that it would naturally just like drain itself out. You don't want to create a waterlogged situation near the roots of your plant because it can suffocate it. So you have a mixture of a potting mix that's a mixture, again, like I said, of cocoa coir or peat moss. So that's what we start off with. Just your basic standard potting soil. Then the next ratio that we do and add into it is that we do a mixture of a mushroom compost or a cow manure compost. Again, these are brands you can find at your basic sort of big box store. And the reason why we do that is that the mushroom compost has a natural beneficial fungicides and bacteria that really helps with the roots of the plant. And then the cow manure has more of a extra nutritional base for feeding the plant and helping it grow. But we mix these things in together to create the ultimate base of our soil mixture. And that helps us, again, with you want your soil mixture to be loose. And that's why we created ourselves. We want it to be loose. We want it to be aerated. We want it to basically feel like how this is, where I can stick my hands in it, lift it up, and the soil just like naturally just crumbles out. But because of the potting mix, it's going to hold the water. Because of the cow manure and the mushroom compost, we have some good beneficial fungicides, bacteria, and also macro and micronutrients that are involved. And the last thing that I do, once I have my bed mix in, I recommend people get like an all-purpose fertilizer. So this right here is an all-purpose, and again, the key word is finding an all-purpose natural organic fertilizer. And this is just an example when something that has, it might say 953, or this one here says 1077, but you want something that's a complete fertilizer that has a good balance. You don't want something that's too much of the first number, which is the N, which stands for nitrogen. Nitrogen is utilized when you plant to help with creating the leaves. So if you're doing leafy crops like your lettuce, your kale, or your collards, you want something with a lot of nitrogen, even with corn. But then you have like the middle, which is the P, which stands for like your phosphorus, right? So your phosphorus is in place for more of what I call like your fruit crops. So if you're doing your tomato, your squashes, and things like that, you want to make sure it's strong. And the last one is the potassium. So the potassium is the K, but that's more for like your root-based crops. So your potatoes, your carrots, your turnips, kohlrabi to a certain extent, you want to make sure that. But to start off with your bread mix, you just sprinkle what I call 1 pound. You don't have to get like to bring a scale out to the garden and say, hey, this is 1 pound, maybe not. But what you could do is just get like your regular measuring cup, get about 3 cups of it, scoop it out, and just sprinkle it over a 4x8 area. So again, this box behind me is 4 feet by 8 feet long. So 1 pound of this sprinkled into your area creates the ultimate, what we call the magic soil mixture that you would need in order to be able to grow food for yourself. So what we've hit on so far is like the sun was just popped up, number 1. 2, the location of your garden, making it in close proximity where your house and stuff is at. 3, what type of container that you're going to utilize in your garden box. So again, I'm doing the raised boxes, but you could use 5-gallon buckets. You could use old trash cans. I've seen people use cinder blocks, but again, I like to use like the lumber, the pine, because you can find it at your store. And then the 5th thing is making your own soil mixture. That's the mixture of potty mix, mushroom compost, cow manure, and a complete fertilizer. So once you get those, that's your base, that's your foundation for what you're going to grow. So the next segment, what I'm going to dive into is what do you plant at this time of year and how do you plant it? All right. So like I said before, we're in the summertime, the spring, summer months. So what we're actually planting or what we intend to harvest in about 2 months. So that's one thing to always remember when you're coming up with your garden plan, is that you're planning this for what you want to eat in about 2 to 3 months from now, right? So 2 to 3 months, think about that menu, think about what you want to consume, and start from ground zero. So what I like to do is always start off with everybody's favorite, tomatoes. So tomatoes, these are like 2 varieties that I'm growing in our garden here, which is Bella Rosa and also a Sun Gold, which is a cherry tomato. I like to divide tomatoes up into 3 categories. So the first one, of course, is your cherry tomato, which is a tad bit smaller. They tend to grow just a little bit bite-sized, just for your children. The next one I like to do is called a slicer tomato. So this is what the Bella Rosa represent. But there's something that's key when it comes to tomato. You have 2 different core types. You have what's called a determinate, and then you also have something known as an indeterminate, right? So a determinate tomato is one that's going to grow to a certain height, maybe 2 or 3 feet tall, and it's only going to produce for about about a month or so once it starts time to harvest. And that tends to be more of your hybrid. So if you like your better boys when you go to the store, or your celebrations, those tend to be determinate. But then you have those that are called indeterminate. And as the word says, indeterminate basically means it keeps growing, keeps growing, keeps growing. And the whole point of those are more of your heirloom variety tomatoes. So like your Cherokee purples or your Morgan lifters, right? And so that's another type of tomato you could grow. But if you want to use those, you have to have some sort of trellising system to kind of keep up with it. So spring, summertime, tomatoes. But one thing about tomatoes, you can start them yourself, but you should plant your seeds at the beginning of February if you intend to put them into the ground by April, because they roughly need about 6 weeks in order for them to grow fully. So just tomatoes. Next, bell peppers. So bell peppers, hot peppers, all the same. Again, takes you about 6 or so weeks. You want to start these yourself from transplant. And I'm emphasizing some things to start from seed, because as you do go to your big box stores to get like the plants that you see, you're very limited. But if I told you there was over like 500 different varieties of tomatoes, almost 300 something different varieties of peppers, and almost 200 or something different varieties of okra. Man, you imagine what your garden would look like with that much diversity in the back? Can you imagine what your meals would look like if you could plant them yourself and like serve it to your friends and family? Same thing happens with peppers. And so what we like to do is kind of keep it traditional. So we either do some bell peppers, a couple hot peppers, mainly like jalapenos, but this is the season that you want to get your peppers in. And if you really want to be bold, you can oftentimes find places that are doing what's called ghost peppers, which are supposed to be like the hottest peppers like on earth. And I've seen like the ghost pepper challenge where people have like taken bites of them and see how long they can like last or sweat or pass out. We don't want you to pass out. We're not condoning doing the ghost pepper challenge. But peppers. So again, something that you can utilize for your garden space, fairly easy to plant, things like that. Next, I would like to call this like my cucumber family. So in this area here, this is where you can grow your yellow squash, your zucchinis, your pan, and also your basic like market more sort of cucumbers. All those are all part of like the same family. And sorry, I need to back up 1 second. So as I was talking about laying out what to plant, when to plant, I like to tell people about what we call crop rotation. So you spread out your plants into different families, and that helps with pest control, and it helps with like disease pressure in your garden boxes. And if you see behind me, I have multiple garden spaces that I'm using. So each season I could do what's called a rotation. So I don't plant all my squash in the same place. I don't plant my tomatoes in the same box each and every year. I don't plant the cucumbers in the same box. I rotate them to different locations. So that helps with controlling disease and pest pressure. So shout out to George Washington Carver with crop rotation. Everybody knows for the peanut, but I know I'm about building up your soil health. And that's just one of the things that he gave to us as farmers, especially urban farmers, with sustaining the land. So back to what I was saying. All right, so squashes. So squash is another crop that goes really well for like the summertime. It's what we call a fruiting crop that produces multiple flowers, multiple crops over a season. But I tell people with the squash, the cucumbers, and the zucchini, I ask for people to do what's called session planting. So you just don't plant it one time. You think about planting it every 2 to 3 weeks. And that's part of the reason why I encourage people to start their own seeds. So you can start your own seeds like what I've done here. And yeah, this might be a lot of zucchini for these boxes here. But what we do is that we start our seeds every 2 to 3 weeks, and it allows for us to have a constant harvest to help with, again, with bug pressure, pest control, things like that along those lines of that nature. So this is one of the seed trays that we've done with the kids. Also, we have a program with Flint River Fresh with the 4C Academy. And so we have high school students that we're teaching them about sustainable agriculture, urban farming. And so these kids actually grew these transplants you see right here in their greenhouses. And I forgot to mention, all the seeds I'm talking about that I'm doing, these kids have also planted them into the greenhouse. In the next couple of weeks at the community garden sites that we talked about, we'll be putting them into the garden to make sure that fresh food is readily available for our community and things like that. So again, this is just an example of the squash tray that we've done. All right, so with the squashes, and why I like to, again, starting your own seeds, and I always like to do a close-up of this, so I'm going to walk up to the camera on it. All right, so you got your squashes, zucchini, and your squashes, your yellow squash is yellow, your zucchini tends to be like a green color, but we like to introduce like a little bit of variety. So this here is called a Golden Delight zucchini. When was the last time that you went to like the market, to the grocery store, and you saw a zucchini that looked like this, right? But the flavor of it is like your normal zucchini. But again, about growing your own food, growing your own groceries, is that it allows for you to change your palate, to change what's served on your menu, to give people something that they haven't seen before. So as we talk about the zucchini, you know, even we talk about the tomatoes. Imagine if you made a salsa with a yellow beefsteak tomato for like your salsa base, or you made your marinara sauce. Hope I said that right. But hopefully you got your tomato sauce with like a different color, a different flavor. And people oftentimes say, you know, if you eat fruits that have purple in their color, it adds antioxidants that are beneficial for you. And a lot of those things you can get by planting your own seeds, starting your own plants, in your own like trays. And the thing I like about Southwest Georgia, you don't need to have a fancy greenhouse in order to grow your own seeds. You really just need a shade tree and a couple styrofoam cups and some potting soil. You can start most of your seeds outside in the shade because we have nights that are at 70 degrees. And that's really the germination rate for most of your seeds to be about 70 degrees. So I just want to do a close-up with this because, again, when the last time you went grocery shopping? It's called. We're here today to show you how to grow your own groceries. So when was the last time you went grocery shopping and you saw like a golden delight or a golden zucchini, right? And there's a whole lot of other varieties and things like that that you can get related to seeds. So this is just one of the companies that we use, Haas Tools. There's some local boys out of Georgia, so shout out to Greg and Travis for taking care of us. All right. And so then with that, last thing besides, before I go to our favorite crop, is that so you can also plant beans at this time of year. You can also plant your peas this time of year, okra, eggplants, another variety. But also I want to emphasize, and this is going to help out with our last segment, watermelon. All right, so with the watermelon, it's just another one of those type of crops that you can grow. Everybody loves it for the summertime, but this is going to lead into the last thing I really want to talk about before I get into fertilization. Watermelon, everybody's favorite, but it's a crop that requires a lot of space. So if you're going to plant watermelon, you almost have to dedicate a space that's probably like 5 feet by like 20 feet long just in order to grow 4 watermelon plants, right? 4, like 5 by 20, you're only getting 4 watermelon plants. You might can get 8 watermelons off of it because watermelons are viney. They spread out. And so when you plant them into the ground, you have to anticipate that their vines are going to go 3 feet to 4 feet long, spread out all over the place. But I like to encourage people to grow watermelon because, again, it's one of those crops that by seed, you could grow so many different colors, so many shapes of them. So you have like your moon and star, which is like a yellow variety of watermelon. You have like your orange glow, which has an orange meat variety of watermelon. You know, you got your sugar babies, which is like a small iceberg boxy one that's, you know, that type of watermelon. You got your crimson sweet, your jubilees, your sangria. But again, it's one of those things that you can grow that everybody loves. I mean, if you want to get your child out in the garden to tend to it, plant a couple watermelon seeds and let them know that that's theirs to harvest and for them to enjoy. I've seen like this one picture of like the baby, maybe like 2 years old, with a cut open watermelon, just putting their hands in and just eating it, like just shove it into their face, right? It's about growing your groceries. So watermelon is one of them. So as I talked about these different things, I just want to just go real quickly on what we call spacing. So again, in container gardening, your spacing is everything. It determines your input, your output, right? And if you don't know how to maximize or plant in your garden space properly, you can set yourself up for I like to just call it a hot mess, right? Where you just got like a whole lot of gumbo happening in your garden and everything is just mixing in and blending in and you can't tell where you planted this from that. So one thing we do with the kids in the school garden is that we follow a technique that's called square foot gardening. So as you see right here with this space that I've done, we divided our garden space up into squares. Our squares tend to be 1 foot long or 16 feet wide based upon the plants that we're going to do. So this spacing right here in front of me, each of these squares is 16 inches by 16 inches. That's enough spacing for your tomatoes, your peppers, your cucumbers, also for your beans, corn, and those type of crops, right? And this works out fairly easy, and it's easy like to teach kids how to use it. So for per square, 1 plant dropped into the ground, easy to execute. And again, this space here, we'll just basically do this for tomatoes when they're ready for transplant. Perfect. The other square over here is 4 feet by 4 feet. Now, this is going to shock you. So this space here is only good enough for, hold your breath, pause, for 1 squash plant or 1 zucchini plant. And you might be saying, why? It's just 1 plant. But squash and zucchini, when they grow out fully, they have big, beautiful green leaves. And you want to have enough space so you can see around the plant to know it's time to harvest. Because anybody that's ever grown a zucchini, they all have stories of them looking and harvesting, taking a break for 2 or 3 days, and then the next thing you know, they come home and have a zucchini that's like this long, right? And if you ever had a zucchini this long, it's nasty. There's no flavor to it. You can't make a great zucchini bread, right? So the whole thing about our spacing is 4 feet by 4 feet is ideal for like our squash plants. So again, 16-inch grid squares. And how we make this is fairly simple. Just some mason string, a hammer, and some roofing nails. Just spaced out properly for your plants to be dropped into the ground. Fairly easy to do so. And again, for this, it's a squash plant. So what I'm gonna do, because I've been a lot of talking, I wanna just plant something real quick to give myself a break. How about that? I think that'll work with y'all on Facebook. That'll work with y'all on social media. I hope so, because we need to do it. So again, trusted tools, basically just a hand shovel. Find the center point of your box. Put your plug up nice and easy. And if you do your transplants just right, the roots will kind of hold together forward. It doesn't break apart. It lets you know that it's just right. You see, I just pulled up out the tray, nothing fancy trick or anything like that. And the last thing, I'm gonna walk in a little bit close for this close up. So before you put your transplants directly into the ground, in addition to that base mix that I gave that starts it off, you want to do like a basic sort of like seed starter, like fertilizer mix. And this helps with helping eliminate or minimizing root shot. Because just think about it. I just moved this plant from its apartment that has been living in for about 3 to 4 weeks, right? And I just said, now you have to move. So I'm taking you to a whole new neighborhood that you're not familiar with. So I want to give you some things that you know will help you take root to be in place. So this is just a basic sort of seed starter mix. And the main reason why I like using this particular brand is because of this thing at the bottom, which is called mycorrhizae. And that basically means it's helping the roots form energy that allows for them to build up strength and things like that. And it also has some other like beneficial biological stuff like kelp meal, crab meal, a lot of things that are organic in nature that help with building your soil up. So again, take your tray out. Don't forget like your starter mix. And I like to do the Karate Kid technique where I just say a little bit of wash on, wash off, put it down at the base. And then in about this plant here, where I love squash and zucchini during our summer months, is that basically within 30 days of me putting that plant into the ground, we'll start producing a harvest. And so if you're looking at trying to feed your community, one thing I look at as well is like how quickly can the crops I get into the ground be ready for people to consume, be ready for people to eat, you know what I mean? And so again, that's that squash plant. I'm gonna plant some other ones and stuff like that. And the last thing, now we got our, 2 more things. Now we got our squash in the ground. You gotta be able to water, all right? And so with our summer days that we have here, you almost, if you're gonna do it by hand, you need to be able to water your garden boxes about 2 times a day. Like first thing in the morning and possibly in the evening time, just because of the heat. You know, like we have days now, I mean, it's March and they're talking about 90 degrees next week, right? And we haven't hit the summertime. So you think about how you are thirsty, how you can feel dehydrated. Your plants go through the same thing because what makes up the chemical nature of your plants is water. A majority of, just how our bodies are 75% water, plants are exactly the same. And you can see the stress that plants receive when they don't receive enough water, right? So we want to make sure that you have like some sort of watering system. And again, like I said, I'm the lazy man farmer. So what I do is I hook up a system that is automated. So I'm gonna go in for like another little close up so you guys see this. So this here is what we call a manual timer. This part right here connects to your water faucet hole, and this connects as well. And we have behind here like a micro sprinkler system. But this timer, it allows for you, the lazy man farmer that I am, it has like numbers on it, right? So this basically lets me know I can run the water for 120 minutes, 2 hours, which is enough time for my plants to get what they need. And it's just like a turn dial, right? And I'll put it near the microphone. You hear that? You hear the click? All right, so that lets you know that it's working, but it's automated. So once I hook up like the water hose to the system with the micro sprinklers, it sprays the roots of the plant. It keeps them hydrated, but it runs for like 2 hours, 1 hour, however long I see fit, but allows for us to make sure that the plants get the watering system that it needs. The second thing that I do in addition to this, we have what's called microjet sprinklers behind me. So these are the small little sprinklers that go, they spread out 4 feet. So I have them spaced out throughout the bed. They just cover like a 4-foot area, but what it gives is it shoots water out in a sort of like rain pattern, a sort of a shower pattern. So again, mimicking nature for the plants, not giving them heavy bouts of water, just naturally just flowing off the top. They're naturally covering the water base, and it just helps it stay in place. So the last thing in addition to the water is to really make your plant jump, fertilizer. So like as I said earlier, when the plant gets into the ground, we give it that bio starter boost. But every 3 weeks, especially during the summertime, we have a fertilizer schedule. And it's really easy for you to do at home. So it's 2 things that we like to use. Both of them are natural in nature. So number 1 is just your typical like fish emulsion, fish fertilizer. So again, just doing a close-up. So you might go like to your box store, your feed store, and you want to say, hey, I'm looking for a fish fertilizer for like feeding my plants from the leaves, or you could put in what we call drenching, is where you spray it right there at the roots of the plant. And again, easy to use, doesn't take a lot, like a tablespoon and a gallon sprayer works. And the new product that I fell in love with is, again, shout out to my boys at Haas Tools. This is called Micro Boost. So what this does is anybody that's ever taken a multivitamin knows that you have your standard, your A's, your B's, and your C's, and your D vitamins that you need, but you also need like your calcium, your magnesium, and that's what this provides for your plants. Because on certain plants, you need a little bit more boron, you need a little bit more magnesium, and this Micro Boost helps you add that to your soil mixture, to your water mixture. And what I like about this, both of them are concentrated liquid, so I can mix them together in a sprayer and just spray them around the base of the plant. Again, you're just talking about a cap full of each one and a gallon sprayer, and you have all the basic that you need for fertilizing like your plants and getting them going and getting them started. So again, I'm Farmer Fredo. I was welcome to my garden spot. And again, this is all about introducing you guys to like what it takes to grow your own groceries. So as you watch this video, if you have any other comments, any questions, any topics that I didn't talk about, feel free to put them into the bottom of the comment section. And again, you can find me on Facebook at Farmer Fredo or at Flint RiverQuarium. Same thing, you can find me on Instagram. So again, this is your boy Farmer Fredo. I'm checking in, checking out. Y'all know what I'm about, growing food. So peace out, God bless, and take it light.